Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, then you are listening to an Unsociable Hour, which makes me Matthew Elliott White. This weekly podcast exists to introduce you to awesome people, and tonight's awesome person I am honoured to present is Jordy Brown. Jordy, my dear, welcome to the show.
Yes, my love. Thank you very much. Honoured to be here. Super excited.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. It means a lot. First things first, what are you drinking this evening?
I am drinking Parma Violet Gin with cloudy lemonade.
Oh, nice. So, what would you recommend to people that don't necessarily drink gin, such as myself, but are quite interested in it?
Well, the basic gin, the proper gin, as I call it, I don't particularly like it. I think it's very bitter. So I go for the sweeter tasting ones. So Parma Violet. There's one that's called Unicorn Tears, I think it is, and it's pink and glittery. The pink gin, Gordon's pink gin's nice. So anything with a bit of flavour, or you can get mixers that you can drop in your gin that gives it a little bit of flavour. They're fun.
That sounds awesome. I imagine with drinks like that, it must be quite misleading as well, because, I mean, to actually have kind of like a sweet flavour to a drink, I imagine you must kind of lose track of how much you're drinking.
It's dangerous. So you can, because it tastes more, I don't like the taste of tonic either, so I drink it with lemonade. So when you have the Parma Violet with lemonade, it's obviously very, very sweet. And I'll normally have a drink on like a Friday night, to chill out after work, so I'll put the PlayStation on and I'll have a drink, and normally I'm talking to friends or family over the chat. So you find out that you're drinking more, and then before you know it, your head's starting to pound a little bit. Like when we went to Birmingham for that gig, obviously me and Perry drank a whole bottle of gin before we'd even got out, if you remember rightly, because we were putting the nice flavoured mixes in it and we were having a chat, and yeah, that was fun.
I, quite fortunately, I mean, I was not in the room while you were drinking that. I remember getting back at the end of the night and finding this full bottle of gin that you had brought. I remember seeing maybe 20% of the bottle remaining. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, that explains everything.
I didn't know how much we'd drunk until Perry knocked on the hotel door the next morning, and she was like, mate, how are you feeling? I was like, honestly, don't even look at me because I can't. And then she just shook this part empty bottle at me, and I went, no, we didn't. And she was like, yeah, we did. And I was like, oh my days.
That was the, am I right in thinking that was the K-pop night?
K-pop night for Perry's birthday in Birmingham, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I do remember the state.
As you were driving through Birmingham, and I was like, oh, I can't do this.
I do remember now, because we had to stop off for McDonald's breakfast, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah, that was so rough, man.
It was. I remember we had to wait there just long enough in order to, because we'd arrived obviously with the breakfast menu, and I think it must have been about 9 a.m. and I do believe we had to stay in that McDonald's until the time when they started serving the McFlurries. Is that right?
Yeah, we did. Me
At which
and Perry
point
were like, we can't do this without a McFlurry. And I think we'd ordered like orange juice and lemonade, if I remember rightly, ordered loads of food, and then me, Perry and Dale just sat looking at these burgers like, this was not a good idea. But you were all right, to be fair. You were all what's up with you?
I'll be honest though, I mean, I don't know how I think it was because I knew I was driving the following day. I mean, I remember being quite drunk at the event, but I must have sobered up through the night knowing that I was driving us home. But it is bizarre.
I remember Perry went out for a breath of fresh air, and I just leaned over the banister, and I was like, mate, I'm done. I need to go home. So Perry was bribing the bouncer to let us back in, and he looked at her and he was like, it's still open, you can come back. And she was like, no, I'll get you some chips, it's fine. And I was dying laughing.
Yeah, because he was quite willing to just let you in for nothing, and you guys were, no, honest, I'll buy you something. Just,
what do you want?
Hang on, what? We can go in.
Do you want chips and cheese? Is that what you want? Because we'll go and get you some.
Oh, crazy night, man. There's been plenty of nights like that.
Oh, yeah, there has.
It kind of seems strange to think that we're still in the same world, you know?
Yeah, it's so different. I mean, like, it's been months since we've all properly hung out and done anything fun. Even just like the nights that we have here or at your house, they're some of my favourite nights.
They are the best nights. I think one thing that I've learned through the whole COVID thing is really that kind of the terminology of quality in a way, where it used to be kind of, right, we're all together, where are we going? That used to be kind of the major, it felt like that was the major question, but I think it was, the real quality comes from just being together. It doesn't really necessarily matter what you do, like what the context of what the evening is. It's not important so long as you're together. And I think that's one of the things that I think as a society we're all kind of learning. Well, most of us, I believe, are learning kind of what being apart actually kind of means. But hopefully, you know, it will be. I don't think we'll ever obviously go back to how things were before as a world, but I think they keep saying the term the new normal.
Yeah, I think it's been a real hard adjustment, to be fair, that obviously the whole COVID situation, because I can remember about January time catching something on the news about COVID, because obviously it originated in China, didn't it? And I can remember hearing something on the news about it and thinking, oh, you know, that's just another nothingness, nothing will come of it. And then, like, out of nowhere, the whole world stopped, and you've had to like adapt to a whole new way of living to try and keep some sort of normality. It's so hard.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember because there was we had the kind of fright, because obviously we were in Japan over Christmas and we come back to find that this has happened. And I think still to this day, I think to suggest that COVID hasn't been circulating around the world before January, I think would be a little bit odd. I think it'd be a bit of a false belief, because I think there'll have been people traveling all around the world and all around, especially for Christmas and New Year. But I do remember thinking to myself that we had a little bit of uncertainty, thinking, well, we've not come back from China, but we've come back from Asia. Like, should we kind of flag ourselves? Do we need to do anything? But I mean, nothing ever came of it, thank goodness. And but I mean, at the start of this, it was being widely suggested that it was just like the flu. And so even back in February, Perry and I went to Glasgow for the weekend, and we knew that COVID had cases in Glasgow, but it didn't feel as dangerous as it would later feel. So it's kind of, I think questions need to be asked on how these things are reported in the future. You know, when all this is over, there really needs to be a case of, there either needs to be more urgency at the start, because maybe that would have kind of meant less excess deaths. Maybe it would have helped us to have prepared more and everything. So I think that's something that needs to be looked into. But what I'm most grateful for is that, fortunately, you know, we are all safe, and I do hope that you guys will remain safe throughout the entirety of what comes next. But Jord, you've said that you've listened to a few of the previous episodes, so you probably know what is coming. So I would like to ask you some quick-fire questions, if that's okay with you.
Okay, that's fine with me, darling.
Okay. So, what is your favourite colour?
Purple.
Your favourite drink?
Gin.
Your favourite fast food restaurant?
Burger King.
Bath or shower?
Shower.
What's your favourite comfort food?
This is going to be a bit weird, because it's not really a comfort food, but it is to me sushi.
No, that is very comforting. I completely agree with you there.
It just fills me with such happy thoughts that I just class it as a comfort food.
Excellent. Your favourite music album?
Linkin Park Hybrid Theory.
Your favourite movie?
Favourite Terminator 2.
The favourite fictional place you would like to visit?
Oh, Cosmo Canyon.
Nice. The favourite question you've answered so far?
What's your favourite food?
What's the best way to cheer you up?
I don't know. Put Final Fantasy on.
What is your favourite way to relax?
Final Fantasy. Anything gaming. I'm trying to get a little bit, like, widen my gaming of it, but my fallbacks are Final Fantasy. I really like Ark and 7 Days to Die.
Okay. So I suppose this would mean the same then. What do you most enjoy doing?
Gaming, spending time with Spud.
Your daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you had a theme song, what would it be?
Well, I've got a song that I play that reminds me of Bubba. So I suppose I'd pick that, and it's My Demons by Starset.
Okay.
And it's if a parent with a mental illness could ever write a song for the child, it would be that song, because the chorus, as you know, I'm getting a piece on my arm for it. The chorus is, we are one and the same, you take all of the pain away. And it just, every time I'm feeling a little bit low or things are getting on top of me, I sort of play it, and it reminds me of her. So I'd say that would be my theme song.
That is a beautiful answer, man.
Oh, thanks. Got a bit deep there, didn't I?
You did. I like it. I liked it. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. What's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, my guilty pleasure. Definitely not stealing chocolates out the candy drawer, because that would not be setting a good example to anybody. And it's definitely not staying up way too late gaming when I've got work in the morning.
Excellent. I think you might like this one. This one is specifically for you.
Oh, okay.
If you had a chocobo, what would you call it?
Oh, mate. Karen.
Karen.
So, obviously on 14, I have a chocobo. I worked really hard and I got one.
Oh, okay.
So I took a picture of it and sent it to Dale because I was super excited that I'd got it. And he says, oh, that's cool. And then I says, oh, what do you think to the name? And he went, well, have you spelt Sharon wrong? And I was like, no, it's Karen. And he went, I don't get it. And I was like, well, Karen in Greek mythology ferries the soul of the dead across the river Styx. So Karen, that's the name I'd pick.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Jord, I created this podcast with the intention of introducing people who have been inspirational to me in one way or another. You are an incredibly inspirational person.
Oh.
I have had the fortune to know you for quite a long time.
Yeah,
I have seen you take on multiple challenges, be faced with quite difficult situations, and yet you've managed to face them all down and come out the other side, swinging. Yeah. Like, how does somebody channel that strength?
So before, obviously, my daughter, I've always had a lot of support. So I've had, obviously, Dale through thick and thin. No matter what, he's always been there. And then I was really fortunate that we've always been close, you and myself. But then when I finally met your lovely wife after so many years, I fell in love with her as well. She's just amazing. And I can text her at stupid o'clock, day or night, and say, as I did the other day, mate, I'm raging. And she doesn't even question as to why. She's like, okay, right, what do we do about it? I'm really fortunate that Dale's family has took me in like one of their own. So before, I had a really good network of support, but mainly my source of strength these days is my daughter, because everything I do with her at the forefront of my mind. I want her growing up I want her to be proud of who she is. I want her to be a strong, independent woman, and for her to be everything I want her to be, the best way to do that is to be a role model for her. I mean, it's not all swings and roundabouts. Obviously, that there's things that I struggle with and things that I wobble about sometimes. But now I sort of give my head a shake and I'm like, right, you need to sort yourself out because she needs you to. And if the very, very rare occasions that doesn't happen, it doesn't help, I'm really stubborn, Matt, so I won't let something beat me. So if something's trying to get on top of me and I think it's going to get the better of me, I'm like, absolutely not. I'm going to do everything in my power to pull myself out of this funk, because you will not be the thing that takes me down.
That's amazing. That in itself is such an inspirational answer. If, in terms of your daughter, I mean, I know that we had discussions kind of before your daughter was born, and I know that there were a lot of concerns, a lot of worries that you had. That I imagine a lot of new parents have anyway, but I know that for you they were quite intense, because I know that you kind of had a lot of worries in that sense.
Yeah.
But the fact that you were able to find that inner strength, to think to yourself, you know what? No, I can do this. I'm going to prove to myself, to everybody, and most importantly to my daughter, that I am going to be everything that she needs in a mum. And you absolutely have been. You have been fantastic. It's been amazing watching how your daughter has changed you and the dynamic of your household. It has been amazing to see. And so, in terms of, I wanted to ask you that question because I wanted the audience to see that strength that you have, and I knew that would be a great answer.
Thank you.
In the last episode, my guest Joe touched on the topics of self-assurance and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
He discussed his feelings of insecurity and his belief that he lacks confidence. You are, rightfully so, a very confident, self-assured person. What advice could you give to those listeners who do suffer with insecurities and feelings of inadequacy?
This is going to be really, really cliche, but and just fuck what anybody else thinks. As long as you are true to yourself, and obviously you're not hurting anybody, the people that genuinely matter in your life will always love and support you, and you don't need to prove yourself to the people that are going to give you shit about it are the people that you don't need in your life. So I think I overcompensate because I am quite a fragile little soul, really. So I tend to overcompensate with it. But then I also walk around with, well, who are you? You don't mean anything to me. My friends and my loved ones, they accept me for who I am. And if you can't, then I don't really need you wasting my time. And that's pretty much how I look at it. People that do have those negative impacts and make you feel that way are nothing but a waste of your time. And it's hard because some of them can be what you would class as friends, and some of them are family. I've been there, I've lost a few, and at the time it's devastating. How are you going to get through? But when you come out the end of it and you're able to hold your head up high and say, this is who I am, your approval isn't needed, again, really cliche, I think there's nothing better to be able to do. That's quite freeing. To have that point of view. Not people, some people won't, and that's absolutely fine, but that's just how I deal with it. I'm pretty much like, well, who are you? You're nothing to me, so I don't really care if you like me or not.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the major kind of tripping points that we have as human beings is I think too many people worry about things that don't matter.
Yeah.
I think that people worry. One of the previous guests that I had on, Tom, a lovely bloke, but he said that he was kind of worried almost in some way to kind of express the things that he liked, because he was worried about that judgment. He was worried about what people thought, and I think we live in a world now. You're always going to have dickheads, but I think we live in a world now where people are slowly starting to be more comfortable talking about what they like. But obviously, there are still people that kind of haven't yet figured out how to find that inner voice, how to express who they are.
We've got a friend that I talk to over the Discord, and he really, really likes anime and K-pop and manga, all the greats.
Yeah.
But because it's like a bit of banter, a bit of a running joke, he's embarrassed to admit that that's what he likes. So I came on, and this started with me because obviously, my number one passion at the minute is Attack on Titan, and they started ripping me for it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're watching a cartoon?" I'm like, "Yeah," says the man who sat playing a video game. I mean, come on, it's same as. And I ended up saying to him, because he does get really genuinely upset about it, and I was like, "Why are you bothered what they're saying? At the end of the day, if that makes you happy, then fuck them."
Exactly.
And he was like, "Yeah, I know, but..." And I'm like, "No, mate, no, yeah, but..." He says, "You don't know what it's like." And they do it to me. So I do know what it's like. I just don't care. Because while you're watching EastEnders or wherever you're watching, I'll be watching something that's actually worth my time.
Exactly. You should never ever be ashamed of what you love and what makes you happy, because that is one of the things that makes you you. And so that is amazing. I find the topic of confidence quite an interesting one, because I think that it's something that confident people often don't think about, whereas those who believe that they lack confidence, it seems to be with them all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I was able to get your opinion on that. In terms of people who shit on others from across a computer, you know what I mean? Like, we should not be living in a world where we're upset by somebody typing something out on a computer.
No.
But that's just my opinion.
The other day, it was really stupid. So I put a comment on, obviously I like watching Neebs Gaming, and I put a comment on their Arc series, and it was something about my daughter, and I was like, "Oh, because she likes watching it. She literally watched it all her life. So every Saturday we all sit and we watch Arc." So I'd put a comment on saying, one of the favourite parts of my week is sitting down and seeing my little girl smile when the theme tune plays, and just sort of left it at that, hoping, maybe one of them would see it and get a shout out or something daft. And then I got an email through yesterday, actually, and someone had put a comment on, like, "Oh my fucking God, who cares, you loser? This is probably spam anyway. Nobody gives a shit about you or your kid." Now, part of me wanted to hunt him down and be like, "You what?" And then the other part of me just sat there like, "You sad little man, if all you've got to do is scroll through comments that are a year old, by the way, this comment is a year old, and troll somebody you've never met for saying how happy they are in their family, then I don't need to do anything to you because you've done it all to yourself."
Yeah, man. Yeah, their lives are already, it's got to be, you've got to be a certain kind of person in a certain kind of mood in order to kind of do something like that.
I mean, what on earth did he achieve? Or she?
Yeah. It's bizarre. I mean, we've spoken before about the challenges of the modern world. We live in an age where we're all connected and yet nobody is.
Yeah.
I think that kind of really highlights it in a way that it feels like it used to be when we were younger, obviously. It used to be kind of, if you were picked on or you were bullied or you were criticised, it was at school or it was somewhere where it was outside the house. You used to, being at home, always felt like quite a safe place. Nobody can upset you or can hurt you or in any way when you're at home, whereas it's the complete opposite now. It feels like there is nowhere for anybody who felt that way, who was upset or cyberbullied in that sense, or bullied in any way. It feels like there's kind of like nowhere for them now to go where they feel safe.
It's really sad that something that's made to bring us together can be used to tear us apart at the same time. It's really sad. You've got to be a certain sort of person to do that to someone, aren't you? Especially someone that you've never met. Like, what on earth? Why would you just waste your time?
Exactly. I mean, but unfortunately, all these platforms and the internet has given way to everybody being able to kind of share their opinion, whether it's right or wrong. I mean, how I feel about social media, but
yeah,
I feel like the idea of social media is great. I think because there are times where I genuinely think it would be, I should have these things because I should be able to sit down and connect with somebody, who I've not spoken to in months, friends from around the world. And yet, when you actually have that tool, when you have that social media, I find you don't use it for that. It's essentially sharing things up, or it feels like it used to be, I'm going to have this platform in order to speak to my friends. But these days, it's, I have this platform so that I can argue with my friends.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have a young daughter. How difficult is it? A wonderful daughter. How difficult is it raising a child in a world that didn't exist when we were kids?
Really, really difficult. So, it wasn't so bad before COVID hit, because you could limit screen time because she was at nursery or she was at her grandma's. Obviously, with COVID hitting and working from home, you haven't got the time in work hours to give her as much attention as she needs. So it's very, very easy to stick the phone in front of her, or the pad, or put YouTube on just for a couple of minutes of quiet while you make the phone call or you write your report.
Yeah.
And then, Dale said to me today, he says, we've got to watch her. And I was like, why? And he says, because she was it's not funny, and I didn't laugh. She was watching YouTube and an ad came up on an ad, and she did no more than started huffing. So Dale said to her, what's the matter? She went, I've got a fucking ad. She's 3. But because obviously she's been exposed to that, because I do try and monitor what she's watching, I do. But I noticed the other day she had some sort of, it looked very cartoony, but if you actually listened to what they were saying, it was far from it. So I turned it off, and I was like, absolutely not, that is not appropriate, you're not watching it. And it's things like she watches this certain channel, it's called A for Adley. Okay. And the series is called Best Day Ever. So obviously every time they show Mum and Dad and Adley and her little brother are doing all great fun stuff, making fortresses, and life is perfect and nobody falls out. And then Bubba will come up and say, Mummy, play with me, Daddy, play with me. And the reality is that Mummy and Daddy can't because we're working. But how do you explain to a 3-year-old that what they're seeing isn't real? Yeah. And I think it's channels like that, as much as they're wholesome and they're done with solely good intent, I think it sets a really unrealistic expectation up, because these little ones that don't understand that it's all a show, and probably 20 minutes before the camera was rolling, Mum and Dad were arguing and the kid was having a meltdown. How do you explain to her that that's not how the real world works? Yeah, it's really, really difficult to try and get her to differentiate. Well, yes, baby, that does look all well and good, but that's not actually how things are. Yeah, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, I suppose. And it's got to kind of have, some impact. When you stop to think that, exactly. How do you explain to your daughter that when all she sees
is you and Dale kind of working from home throughout the day on the computers. She's not going to be able to distinguish whether or not that is you working or that is you gaming.
Yeah.
And so then, I mean, I was speaking to my mum early in COVID kind of thing, and I said, well, I would hope that this will reinstate the importance of the outside world to young people, you know, to kids especially who sit in and kind of sitting on the computers doing whatever. I said, well, I hope that after COVID it makes them think, you know what we miss the most? Outside, being out in the parks and this. But I feel like the more the likelihood is going to be that it's actually going to have kind of become more of a habit.
Yeah.
That kids will now turn to the computer before they consider going out. I mean, I suppose it was going that way anyway, but it feels like almost like the world's kind of done a U-turn and it's suddenly become okay. It's the first time where it seems to be okay for kids sitting on the computer all day.
Yeah.
Because mum and dad have to work. They don't have that time. It's got to be quite difficult.
It is. It causes massive conflicts of interest, because as much as I want to spend every waking moment with her, of course I do, I've also got to think that I've got to support other people. Obviously the role I do, I support others. I've got to keep a roof over her head, but I can't expect a 3-year-old to keep herself entertained for the amount of time that she does. So you do put the pad in and you'll say, right, okay, then come and sit with mummy or sit with daddy and we'll watch something with you. And then you try and grab a spare 5 minutes here and there, or your phone will ring or something will happen. And it's just really, really difficult, because you think working from home it's the be all and end all. It's so much harder. It really is, because you're racked with guilt. Like this afternoon, she said to me, mummy, will you play a game with me? And I was on the phone, so I closed the game down that she had and opened another game up for her, and she was trying to talk to me while I was on the phone. She was saying, mummy, play with me. And I was like, shush, mummy's on the phone. And she just looked at me, she went, mummy, don't you love me? I was like, baby, of course I love you, but I can't. And it's trying to say to her, and I hate saying to her, right, baby, just be shush for a couple of minutes, because mummy's got to do this, because it seems like she's got mum and dad with her all the time, which is what she wanted. But all she's actually getting is mummy and daddy saying, right, okay, we'll just go and sit over there, baby. Just go and do this, baby. Because you're working, finding that balance is so difficult. And I take my hat off to anybody that's found it, because I can tell you now, I haven't.
Yeah. I imagine that everybody is probably feeling the same way. I imagine for those who have been furloughed. But I mean, it's just awful to think, isn't it? Because you think to yourself, you know, you're so lucky to kind of, when you hear about all the people who have lost their jobs and all this thing, all the awful things that have happened due to COVID. I mean, you guys are very lucky, because you have been able to continue working from home, and yet even the best possible outcome has still created this dilemma.
Yeah.
And it's so bizarre, because it's like layers to this thing, you know what I mean?
I can remember when they first said that we were going to work from home, and obviously that Bubba was going to be off nursery. I was like, this is going to be easy. This is exactly what I've always wanted, because obviously, you know, in my previous job I spent a lot of time away from her.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I wanted. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks it was pretty okay. But then you've got to think, that poor girl's gone from seeing her friends, her grandparents, to just being stuck in with the same 2 people all the time.
Yeah.
And it must be so horrible for her as well, because she doesn't understand. Well, try and tell her that people are poorly, you know, that's why we can't go out. And she's like, but why, mummy, why? And then you just look at each other like, well, how else do you explain it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, how do you explain to a child, you know, the complex situation that's happening without, I imagine, terrifying the child.
Yeah.
It's got to be such a difficult situation. I thoroughly commend you guys for everything up until this point. I mean, slowly things are starting to get to this new normal in a way, but I imagine a lot of those worries and a lot of those fears are still there. I imagine, if you're anything like me, the idea of making certain trips or the idea of kind of relaxing things in a way is quite a terrifying aspect, because
it was silly things like, we could have sent her, obviously with me being a key worker, she could have gone back to nursery nearly 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And I can remember saying to Dale, right, okay, the minute that they say that she can go back, she is going back. For our help and for her as well, so she can spend time with her friends.
Yeah.
So we got the email come through saying, you can send her back. I come back on the Monday, do her usual days. Got to the Thursday, and just every fibre of my being was just screaming, don't do it.
Yeah.
So I said to Dale, because Dale had mentioned something about, are we sending her back? And I was like, I can't. And he went, what do you mean? I said, I just can't. As much as it would be easier for us if she wasn't here in the day, for work-wise, there's just something telling me that I just can't send her back yet. And he was like, that's absolutely fine then. We'll keep her off for another month, and we sort of gauge it month by month. It's just, I think until you feel comfortable with what's going on, I don't want to put her at that risk. No,
and I thoroughly agree 110% with you, and I think it's kind of disgusting in a way of how some are being made to feel like criminals for not feeling that it's safe for their children to go back to school. I know that was a major contention for some, where it was kind of suggested that, look, if you do not feel comfortable taking your children back into school, then you do not have to take your child back into school. And that was quite widely accepted until the day when it wasn't, and it seemed like it was within days where they suddenly said, right, we want everybody to start going back in now. And it's like they don't quite understand that there needs to be a progression from A to Z as opposed to a total U-turn.
Yeah. I think controversial, but I think that the only reason things are going back to quote unquote normal is because the economy is suffering. I don't think that we are ready. And personally, I mean, if people have sent the kids back, that is obviously absolutely their choice. But I didn't want my daughter to be in a situation that I wasn't 100% comfortable with. I've got a little bit more of an insight into it only because of the role that I do.
Yeah.
And while I was still getting the reports that I was getting, I was like, no, I can't risk this.
No, of course. And I mean, you say it's a controversial opinion. I honestly believe that the majority of people would agree with you. That I think it's no secret that the economy was kind of the major topic eventually, and the government have said that there would be no trade-off, but I think we've seen that that's a lie in the reopening of the pubs. And I mean, the Saturday just gone in the UK was absolutely wild. I don't know if you saw the pictures.
I mean, the Dev at the top of our street, that was closed within 6 hours, and there was, now I may be wrong, but I'm sure I read 19 police cars at the Dev.
Wow.
I mean, come on, guys. It's not been... You can still have a drink at home. I mean, I know it's not the same, but if you are getting to that point where within hours of being quote-unquote uncaged, that's how you're behaving, what hope is there for us?
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of violence across Nottinghamshire since Saturday, and you just have to think to yourself, did you really just spend 3 months inside, and the first thing you want to do is go out and fight with people? Surely did those 3 months inside not teach you the value of society, of humanity? You know,
human contact that's not ripping each other's head off. Like, I was pretty excited when everything was opening again. I was like, oh, you know, I just want to go to 400 Rabbits because, you know, that's my favourite. Yeah. Not get bladdered, not by any means, but have a nice drink, relax, go and get something to eat. Obviously, we all know where.
Yeah.
And just chill out. And then it came to it and I was like, no, because what is happening in the world, I don't want any part of that. So the times that you can get out, you find that you don't want to because you know what it's going to be faced with, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Which is sad in a way. It's really, really sad because you've been looking forward to this for X amount of months. And you feel that it's just not safe enough to do something. I mean, I haven't felt like that in years going down knots. You know I love knots. Yeah. But I wouldn't even feel safe going into Mansfield or Sutton, by all accounts.
No, it's bizarre. It feels like, well, I suppose this would be the new normal. There's a lot of things that they're either going to take a long time to not be a worry, or perhaps they will always be a worry. I mean, one of the lads that I work with, he made a good point. He said the whole 2 meter rule, said the whole idea of social distancing, he says, what I'm scared the most about is that that's going to become a tick for me, where without even meaning to, somebody stepping towards me, it's going to be an automatic reaction to step back from people.
Yeah.
He says because how do you stop doing that?
How do you untrain your brain when it's been hammered in that something is so serious that you keep your distance? Exactly. How do you then untrain your brain to say, oh no, it's perfectly okay to, like when I go shopping, I will flinch away from people. You know, if they lean over me,
yeah,
I'm like, don't come near me. It's madness, and I've never been like that.
No.
But I think when it's drilled into you and you see what it does, what the disease actually does to people, then yeah, you 100%. I think it's called Corona Crisis Depression. We did like a little bit of a seminar on it, and It's where, because you've been quarantined for so long, your brain is starting to retrain itself, and you becoming quarantined is now safe. It's the new normal, what you must do, and stepping out of your house is poses a danger. So it's sort of, you've got to retrain your brain on it. It was really interesting training.
I think I've not heard of that particular syndrome or that particular context, but I do remember once, and I'm sure it said something along the lines of kind of like how to rewire your brain, and it was to stop people. It was to stop people from doing things like biting the fingernails or any kind of bad habits. And it said that it takes, I could be getting this totally wrong, but I feel like it said that it takes 30 days of doing something consistently in order for your brain to actually rewire that. And you think that, yeah, we've been indoors since March.
Yeah. So this is now the new norm for us.
Yeah.
I've never been anxious about going out socially, never been anxious about going and doing the shopping. Now I dread it. I will absolutely dread leaving the house because, one, you're queuing for God knows how long. Two, I don't know if the people are clean, if they're wearing masks, if what they've been doing. So it's just much easier just to stay in, and that's really sad. And I think that may have a long-term effect on a lot of people, especially the older generation. I think it's going to have a really detrimental effect on it, and they're going to become really socially isolated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I remember thinking to myself that there could have been amazing creations, and maybe there are. But I remember thinking to myself, I remember reading a story at one point, and it was talking about how there was this cafe in Japan, and it was ran by robots. It's not the robot restaurant in Shinjuku, but it's kind of like a separate entity. And the robots are actually voiced and operated to a degree by disabled people who
Okay.
a lot of people who couldn't physically move, and they'd found a way where the robots were moving around depending on eye movement. And
Oh, that's cool.
there was a documentary on it, and it was quite upsetting but really kind of heartwarming, because it it was some of these people that literally could not move, were kind of paralyzed.
Yeah.
And they were saying, like, it's amazing to be able to work and have that social interaction from their bedrooms. And I remember thinking to myself, how is it that in a world of VR, there hasn't been anything for people who are kind of stuck in the house to experience? Like, how, for example, how have there been no things like Google Maps or Google Car out live streaming in the world where you can see that in VR, where you can physically move down streets at your own accord, not just like watching a YouTube? Because I mean, maybe that will happen eventually if we do tend to have certain ways. But I remember thinking that's got to be helpful, at least being able to see the world in some way, even if it is just from home, would be quite important, In kind of going back to the topic of kind of your daughter now obviously growing up in a world that we didn't exist for us, what do you miss the most from life before the internet?
Life before the internet. Ringing your friends. Having to ring a landline.
Yes.
Like, is such and such in? Yeah, I'll just go and get them. Or like when the internet first came out and it was dial-up. God, can you remember dial-up?
Yeah, I can.
And
yes.
I was doing my psychology A-level at the time, and I can remember the arguments that I'd had with my stepdad because he wanted to use the phone and I was on the internet, so he'd like kick me off the internet, and you were only allowed on for like, was it 60 minutes before it timed out, and then you had to reconnect anyway.
Yeah, which was a nightmare, because if I'm right in thinking, it used to take about half an hour to actually load a screen.
Bloody dial-up tone.
Yeah.
Or like, I suppose may come out wrong, but having that ultimate trust in your friends, so you'd be like, yeah, I'll be at such and such at 2:00, and just turning up. Now you text before you leave the house, you text when they're on the way, you get a message, I'm here, where are you? Whereas back when we were growing up, it'd be like, oh Matt, right, I'll meet you at the pub at 6:00, and then you would just both be there, and if you weren't there or if I wasn't there, you just wait outside until they turned up. Wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, and that was it. I do remember setting a date or a time in stone, and it just being, right, we do not have to speak, in that time leading between now and then. I will be there, and if you couldn't, if there was no way that you could be there but somehow couldn't call or whatever, it wasn't a big deal. Nowadays, it's kind of like somebody can bail on you 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
But not just that. Nowadays, if somebody doesn't kind of follow up with people get so outraged. There's the same kind of pre-phone, like pre-mobile phone. Nowadays, if you don't respond to a text within a certain amount of time, it's seen as you're ignoring them.
Yeah, and then you get the, is everything all right, mate? Why are you ignoring me text?
Yeah. Whereas it's people seem to forget that you kind of have your own things going off, and you might just genuinely be busy. Back then, that did not matter. You used to send letters if
You
you
used to have a
couldn't.
pen pal.
Exactly. Like I say, the world is fully connected, but no one is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing in it. I think you become over reliant on internet. Like, social media is a terrible one. Everybody has to post absolutely everything of every second of every day of what they're doing. And don't get me wrong, I'll have a look. I've tend to, as I've got a little bit older, I don't post as much. But yeah, and Snapchat. I mean, Snapchat stories, they're all right to watch. But I've got a person that I've got on Snapchat that has her 4-year-old daughter in the car with her, and she will put Snapchats up where she's recording music. You've got your kid in the car, put your phone down and concentrate on your driving, and things like that, that in your mind, it is more important that I know that you're listening to whatever song you're listening to than your child's safety. That, to me,
And your own.
is absolute madness. It's mind-blowing. It's everybody has to know what everybody's doing, and there isn't you very rarely have the conversations now. Oh, what's up with Matt today? He's a bit quiet. It's, oh, you see Matt's story. Oh, what's up with him? And that's what it is, isn't it? Seeing his status, wonder who that's about.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I came off of it. I mean, first of all, I mean, I'm quite fortunate in a way, is I never had everything that was kind of, I think I had Snapchat for 2 days, and I just genuinely could not work out how it worked. So I remember that was just like, if I can't figure something out in a few days, it just gets deleted, because I just think I clearly I have no interest in
getting a Snapchat off you, and then I Snapchatted you back, and it never got opened, and I was like, that's it, Matt's not got to grips with it.
No, and that would be it, because it would have taken all of my strength to figure out how to send that picture. And
it's
then
a very good picture as well, to be fair, Matt.
I can't even remember where it would have been. But
I think you were just doing a proper just daft smile.
Oh, that's every smile. No, I think that's the thing. I'm not technologically. I mean, you know me. I am not technologically minded. And this is no word of a lie. My grandma is better with the internet than I am.
Wow.
She loves smartphones. She thinks they're amazing. She knows a lot more about it than me, and I just can't. But I remember when I got rid of things like Facebook and whatnot, and I remember just thinking, well, that's it now, because I used to spend so much time on Facebook scrolling through, seeing what everybody's been up to. I felt like there was no need to kind of get in touch with people or ring people, because, oh, I know you're doing okay because I saw you working on the garden, or I know you're doing okay because, he's gone out for dinner tonight with his family. Oh, fantastic. I remember once I'd gotten rid of Facebook, once I'd gotten rid of it for quite a time, I remember running into somebody in the street, and I remember just being able to sincerely just say, what have you been up to? Because I have no idea. And it was an amazing feeling, because suddenly you weren't going to get everything that he put up on his Facebook. Yeah. You were just going to get the things that meant something to him. It would be what he considered to be his life events, as opposed to what Facebook thinks you should know about him.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, it was quality over quantity. And I remember that really being the point where I just thought, that's it. No, I am done. Because there were times where I thought, maybe it's me. Maybe I am just the problem, and maybe my thoughts on this are all are all just a little bit kind of dinosaur. So I would kind of go back to it and I'd try again. And you will know from how many ads you would have received from me over the years.
Yeah.
I tried it many times and I always came to the same conclusion. And right up until that point where it was getting embarrassing because questions were starting to be asked of, why does Matt keep adding me again? And I remember somebody said, if you add me again, I'm declining.
Oh.
Which no, like as a joke, but I remember thinking it is quite embarrassing now. I need to choose. I'm either in or I'm out, and so I chose it out, and I don't regret that. There are
You miss it all.
No, there were times where I did, and there are some things I do miss. Like it's when you don't have it, it's much harder getting in touch with everybody. It is an actual effort, but in the same respect, then it kind of feels more personal. It feels like, right, I have gone out of my way to message this person. It feels more like a reward.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like you feel like you've worked for it. And it's bizarre, and all it is just learning to, for me, it was just learning to not just use social media just for the sake of keeping up to date with everything. I didn't feel like I needed to know. And to be fair, I mean, I never really posted much anyway because I've done a lot of exciting things, but it was kind of at a point where it was like, I don't live that interesting of a life. I'm quite happy just sitting down, and the distaste for social media kind of just compounded over time, and being without it just kind of steadied my mind. Like it's brilliant in a way as well, not having a smartphone. I mean, I'm using one at the moment for obviously FaceTiming and stuff throughout this, but it's not my typical phone. I have like a Nokia 150, and I've used it throughout the majority of the year so far.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because I think smartphones are fantastic for people that want them.
Yeah.
It's fantastic for people that want them. I just don't need them. And what's amazing is I can put my phone down.
And it's actually down.
And it's down. And I've got nothing to scroll through. Maybe the only thing I'll actually check on is the news, but there's nothing. So I can sit down and I can just watch TV, or I can just game, or I can just, and it feels more peaceful for me. But but I imagine to some that'd be quite a nightmare. But I just tried to kind of make my life as peaceful as I could, and it works sometimes, it doesn't in others. I mean, there are, there's always being somewhere and not being able to check what your bank balance is. Or people that are saying, oh, I've just sent you this confirmation email, can you just check that you've got it? And you think, shit, no, I really can't.
No,
you're gonna have to wait till next Thursday when that's expired. So but it is what it is. I think social media is great for the people that want it, and I just think that I didn't use it responsibly, I don't think. And I think that's also my problem with the internet, is we were the first generation to really just be given everything.
Yeah.
In the sense of, hey, here's everything you could want to know about the world.
Ever.
Here you go. Yeah, here you go. Deal with that. We're the first generation that's going to know whether or not the internet has impacted mental health to the degree that it has. Yeah. We're going to be the first generation that's going to, we're still going to be the first generation that's going to figure out whether or not these mobile phones have any effect, in terms of like radio waves and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can remember, but it must have been maybe 15, 20 years ago, it was suggesting that carrying these phones around with you all the time could give like things like brain cancer.
Yeah, you had to you only allowed them for a couple of hours a day, weren't you? And then had to leave them in a different room. I can remember that.
And that was before phones were mini computers.
I can remember when I used to work at my previous job, as many women do, I used to put my phone in my bra. and a senior at the time, she caught me doing it, and she had a meltdown because she was like, that'll cause cancer, get your phone out your bra. And I was like, what? She was like, no, take it out, the radio waves, it'll damage you, take it out. And she genuinely panicked because I'd put my phone in my bra.
Yeah.
But there must be something about because you think you've been on a laptop or a computer all day, you get a banging head.
Oh yeah. There's, but unfortunately we are the guinea pigs.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, can you remember a time before Wikipedia? Wikipedia kind of counts as the majority of the world's education at this point, you know, almost, and yet before we'd search through encyclopedias, we'd go and we'd go to libraries, and
we'd go and still even about.
Yeah, of course. There's trust me, it's not been that long since I was actually in a library, bizarrely enough.
I genuinely thought they'd all shut down.
No, there's the council runs, so they stay open, I think, just to what's the term? Make the tax worthwhile.
Right.
but no, it's interesting to think of how life has changed so much in such a short space of time, and what's mental is to think that it could be a completely different world in another 10 years' time. So I'd like to ask Jord about your thoughts on life. So what's your opinion on the meaning of life?
Why are we here?
Well, it could be anything of what you think life is all about.
I think it is what you make it. I think we're all blessed, and regardless of how we may feel about things sometimes, we are all blessed to be here. And I think it's what you make it. So if you surround yourself with negativity and negative vibes, that's what you're going to get back. You've got to try and put a bit of positive in to get it back.
Yeah.
But the meaning of life, what's that? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is it 42? Am I right in thinking that the meaning of life is the number 42?
What's your favourite theory in terms of like creation, evolution, simulation?
Well, I don't actually know, because obviously, as you're aware, I'm pagan, so
Yeah. I
I don't really buy into any of that. I think that we come from the earth, we go back to the earth when it's all done as we do. Creationism, I've not really got because I don't know if you know, I was actually brought up Catholic, because I'm obviously, my mum's side is Irish, so they are very, very broad Irish. So I was brought up until 16 Catholic, and I think that's probably what pushed me towards becoming pagan. And then you read up on what paganism actually is, and you find a lot of other beliefs have, I don't want to say borrowed ideas from what pagans believe. So I think, the whole religion thing, I don't know. I think it's, if you're not doing any harm to anybody and it makes you happy, then by all means believe what you want. I genuinely support you 100%. When it starts getting to wars and like homophobia and child exploitation, then I've got an issue. Yeah,
of course. I was going to say, you're not a religious person, but you are quite spiritual.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about paganism. Where did your interest in paganism start?
Well, obviously being alternative growing up, when you're all 15 and 16, everyone's pagan, aren't they? And then me and a group of my friends went to Nottingham for the day, and we went to Waterstones, and we went upstairs, and we were looking around, and I saw a book on like introduction to Wicca.
Wow,
So I bought it, and I was reading it on the way back from Nottingham, and just something in me changed. As I was reading it, I fell in love with what I was reading. It was beautiful, and like a peace came over me. That sounds really cliche, I know it does, but it did. And then I bought all the books that I could get, and I learned as much as I could possibly learn on it. And yeah, it makes me happy. That's what I choose to believe. I choose to believe in the spirits and in the elements and everything. I mean, people don't believe. That's absolutely fine. But that's what I believe, and that's what makes me happy. And I think that's the most important thing, isn't it? Is if it makes you happy, then it's worth having a belief in.
Well, exactly, and that's the amazing thing about belief, is that it's what's important to you. You mentioned Wicca, so Wicca is pagan witchcraft. Is that right?
It is, yeah. So you have your main groups is Wiccan and Druids, and Wiccan it's all quite energy based. So you draw energy from the earth and you manifest things that way. Whereas I do believe Druid is more ritualistic based, but I'm not 100%, so I don't know about that. But yeah, they're your two main classes, if you like, and then you've got like neo-paganism and things like that. But I touched on them enough to know that they weren't for me from what I'd read, and it was just Wicca that I fell in love with.
So would you be a Wiccan then, or would it be a pagan?
It's pagan, but you practice Wicca.
Okay. Okay.
Pagan sort of covers them all, and then like Wicca and Druidism and neo-pagan, they sort of branch off. So pagan's like your umbrella, if you like.
Okay. Well, that's amazing, because it's, again, to kind of have something. Like, I know that you say that kind of like at that age everybody kind of experience, and everybody's somewhat interested in things like the occult, but the fact that you kind of discovered that, you chose to discover that on your own, I think that's ultimately one of the great things about a belief system. Is I think if you are brought up in an environment where you are forced to believe such a thing, like for example Catholicism, Catholicism, sorry, you're grown up kind of forced to believe that, but that is not something that you go out and choose to discover and something that becomes meaningful to you. So the fact that, I know that you said like you felt like it was a little bit cliche that, you know, that you fell in love with that gave you a kind of peace, but I think that makes total sense, because that is the belief that you chose for yourself, and I think that makes it much more powerful, because you had the conscious, you had the wherewithal, and you were able to make that decision for yourself.
Believe it or not, the person that I was most frightened telling that I was pagan was my Catholic grandma.
Well, I can imagine.
I was petrified to tell her, because my mama, she's 2'0", Catholic, Irish, proper matriarch of the family. Even now, when she comes over, I'm like, if she shouts at me or tells me to do something, I'm like, yes, mama, no, mama, sorry, mama. So I can remember telling her, and I didn't do it subtly. I went over because after my granddad had passed away, my mama moved back to Ireland. So when I was 16 was the first time I went over to her by myself. And I arrived wearing a Marilyn Manson t-shirt that on the back that said "Bigger Than Satan." I knew exactly what I was wearing when I wore it. And I like walked in a house, and I mean, there's saints everywhere, holy water when you walk in. You think of a typical Catholic house. That is my mama's house. And she'd said to me this Sunday, now as much as I don't believe that I will never disrespect my grandma. So she said to me Sunday, she got me up at 6 o'clock for mass. So I had to go down to mass with her. And obviously, you know it all. You grew up doing it.
Yeah.
And then we took a long walk home, and I was like trying everything to build up the energy to tell her. And I had a pentacle around my neck. And she saw it, and she was like, that's Satan's marking. And I actually explained what the pentacle was. And she was like, oh, right. And she went, well, what does that mean then? She said, does it mean you're a witch? And I was like, well, really, really simply, Mama, yes, but not in the way that you think I am.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she like held my hand, and it was a beautiful Sunday morning. And she went, as long as you're happy, I'm happy.
Oh.
And you know what? That meant the absolute world to me. Don't get me wrong, she will still come over and she'll buy me rosary beads and she buys me things from Lourdes and she says prayers for me, and like she rang me for my birthday and she says, I bought you some rosary beads. Matt, I've got about 1,000 sets of rosary beads. And I was like, okay, Mama, thank you. And she went, don't worry, they're black. And I was like, oh, now then, now we're talking. And like she bought Bubba some rosary beads and she got her some stuff that's blessed, and yeah, okay, Mama, that's fine. She gave me a little piece of red string. Now I'm sure to Mama it means something. It's from Lourdes, so it must mean something to her. To me it's just a piece of red string, but you would have seen it tied to my bag. It's just that little tack bit of red wool that I've got tied on my bag.
Wow.
And the only reason I carry it with me is because my mama bought it me. That's the only reason it's special to me. Well, when she came over last year, obviously I took her to the Japanese meditation garden.
Yes.
And I was walking around in front of her with my bag on, and she got really, really emotional because I had this little bit of red string. And she was like, oh, I thought you'd have thrown it away. And I was like, Mama, you gave me this. That's all that matters to me. Is this to me doesn't represent what it does to you. This represents you to me, so I will always carry that with me. And she got a little bit emotional, and then I got emotional because my mama got emotional.
Oh, bless you. They're not the words she expected from a witch.
No, they're really not. What did I ever tell you what she did when we were at the Japanese meditation garden?
I'm not
oh
sure.
My god, I could have died. So what? It's beautiful. It's so relaxing. Well, obviously there's statues of Buddhas everywhere with offerings on them. So we're walking around, and because my mama's Catholic, any offering, she's chucking money here, there, and everywhere. Well, we got to this one with Buddha, and she chucked. She had a couple of pennies in her hand. She was like, who's that fat little fella there? And I'm like, Jesus Christ, Mama. I was like, please don't say stuff like that. She was like, what? And I was like, Mama, that's Buddha. And she got like really angry and she flicked this penny at him. She went, here, you. Well, obviously I started taking the mick out of her, and I was like, oh, I'm telling all your Catholic friends you've been giving Buddha an offering. And she was like, don't you dare tell him. And I was like, that's it, Mama. I says, they're going to kick you out at club, don't. I says, they're going to take your rosaries off you when you're back at airport. And then she sat there and she said, what is Buddhism? We were in like this underground, this bamboo shelter. Oh, Matt, it's beautiful. So I told her the very little that I knew about Buddhism.
Okay.
And she went, oh, it's a bit like Catholicism, isn't it? I didn't want to upset her because it was a beautiful moment. And I was like, yeah, Mama, it's a bit like Catholicism. And she went, do you know what? As long as they're happy and they believe in what you've just told me, she went, I wish them all the best. And I was like, wow, I was really proud of her, because I was like, you know what? Well done, you.
It's amazing seeing that kind of that compassion from somebody who has kind of led a full life of believing in one particular religious structure, I suppose, to then suddenly kind of still wish everybody else the best, whether they believe in it or not. And I think that's the religious teachings that, to me, would count, would matter. You know,
yeah, if you could have those on, that would be great.
Yeah. because ultimately I believe that if there is a God, I can't, however many gods there might be, I can't imagine that if you're on the level of God, I can't imagine it matters too much to you what people call you.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, I'm sure there wouldn't have been such a thing as free will and free thought in a world where a creator wanted to be so strict, you know.
Yeah.
But, I'd like to ask, what does paganism mean to you personally?
To me, it's about finding balance and joy in the things that are around you. And to me, it gives me the strength that if there is something that I'm not happy with, you can face that by, even if it's just by meditating on something. If I'm having a bit of a wobbly time with my head, I do a lot of meditation, and I do a lot of grounding. Even if I'm pretty level, I find myself grounding a lot. And they're teachings that without paganism, I wouldn't have known. So it does have a genuine positive impact on my day-to-day life as well as my spiritual well-being.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's awesome. That's amazing. I don't know how to follow that up. That is a beautiful answer. That's just made me go, what?
Did you catch out with that one?
You really did. You really did. That's a wonderful way of looking at it, because what it does is it affects you personally. Like, I know that was the question, like, what does it mean to you? But the fact that something that you chose yourself to believe in, and you get that kind of recovery from that, and you get that power from that belief, it's kind of like, it's validation.
Yeah.
You know? What life lessons could we learn from paganism and Wicca?
Respect nature. That's the main one. So I try and teach, but for all my faults, I don't litter. I'll do a lot of things, but I don't know if you've ever noticed, even when I smoked proper cigarettes when we'd been out, I'll never drop them on the floor. I'll always carry them in my hand and put them in a bin, and I won't chuck a can on the floor, because we're already doing enough damage to the earth. So I try and respect nature by not littering, and I try and teach Bubba to do that. So we went for a walk the other week, we took the dog out, and she was hitting a tree with a stick, and I said, no baby, don't do that to trees are our friends and they have feelings too. So I was trying to teach her that, and I'm probably most at peace when I'm in a forest, and I know that sounds really weird, but it's just so peaceful and quiet and comforting, and it grounds you. So I'd say it would teach you to, if you can learn to respect nature and you can learn to respect life, you learn to respect yourself. Now, we all know I hate spiders, despise them. That's the one thing I fail on as a pagan. I'm no good with spiders, because there are teachings that spiders are your loved ones coming to see you. If you choose to believe those teachings, I do not personally choose to believe that, because I'm petrified of them, and any of my family should know that. But I will say to Dale, get it out. So I haven't got a problem with being thrown outside. It's when they disappear and he finds them again, I'm like, right, now, squish it. But like bugs, I won't step on a bug, I'll step over it. And it's silly things like, if you can learn compassion and empathy towards something that you won't get anything back from, like an animal, you're not going to get any compassion and empathy back. You then bring that into your real life, if you like, because you will then learn to show as much compassion and empathy towards others as you can.
Yeah.
I think I do try and be quite empathic towards people, and I do try and put myself in their shoes and think, right, okay, how would I be feeling and how would I deal with that? And I do think, again, that does stem back from the teachings that I've learned through Wicca.
That's amazing. I 100% agree with you in that I will never kill anything. In the times where things have happened, kind of not like out of my control, or things have kind of not quite worked out, I've always kind of felt really bad. I always feel quite guilty, and it infuriates Perry, but it is what it is. It just doesn't quite feel right to kind of kill something just because you don't like it, you know.
It's like getting up, that's like, isn't it? Getting up, going about your daily business, and then someone just squishes you.
Yeah, because they're scared of you.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If there was a spider in here now, I would not be having this empathic conversation with you. I need to point that out. I would be screaming at the top of my voice, kill it. But
Kill it with fire.
Burn the house down. But I'm trying to be like, no, this is that's bullshit. What I'd actually be doing is rocking in a corner screaming. But I do try and think, if it's a Diddy one, I ain't got a problem. Take it outside. I will even step over it so you can take it outside. It's when they're as big as my hand. I'm sorry. You don't pay rent. You're not living in my house. Get out.
That is wicked. That's brilliant.
Honestly, mate, you've seen me when there's been a spider. I'm a total mess.
I have. Thank you for talking to me about that. It's amazing to kind of learn about different beliefs, and the topic of spirituality is a fantastic journey, especially for somebody that doesn't know much about it and kind of hasn't experimented with it. It's a fantastic concept. I think sometimes I suppose it's a problem. Spirituality and religion, although they're very different, I think it's the thought of taking something on that has the power to change your whole life. I find quite scary, but it's amazing to hear people such as yourself who have had those experiences, and it's really kind of shaped who you are. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences on that.
You're more than welcome, darling.
Right, you are I feel like we've been very deep, and I love it.
We get so deep.
We do get very deep. It's kind of like the when you've had a few drinks at the end of the night and you start questioning everything. We do have. Yes, we do have some amazing conversations, and that's one of the reasons I wanted you on here. Now, to take it back a bit, you are a huge fan of music.
I am.
What would your desert island disc be?
Oh, it's got to be Linkin Park Hybrid Theory. It's got to be. It's got everything. Their first album. So I can remember first seeing Crawling. The first video I saw of Linkin Park was Crawling, and I can remember absolutely falling in love. And then I got the album, and I can relate, even 20 years on, I can still relate to every single one of those songs. Everyone takes me back to a memory. Everyone triggers some sort of emotion in me. Yeah, it's got to be Hybrid Theory.
That's amazing. So I believe I already know this, but obviously for the sake of the audience, what is your all-time favourite group?
Linkin Park.
Which, yeah, absolutely. If you had to pick 3 genres of music, what do you love the most?
New metal.
Mm-hmm.
80s.
Okay, yeah.
I like the 80s.
Would that be like 80s pop or synth or
like
glam rock?
Shop Boys and
and Sweet. Okay,
yeah.
So pop. New Kids on the Block.
Yeah, and like Elvis. I know he's 50s, but obviously growing up. I don't actually. I want to say folk music for my third one, because I find that very peaceful and I think it's beautiful. You know, especially the female sing songs in it. the vocals are amazing. It's a very, very peaceful genre to relax to.
That's amazing, and that came like so far out of left. I don't know why I was expecting, but it wasn't folk. See, this is one of the things I love about this podcast is that I feel like I learn something new every time. Folk music, that's because imagine those three mixes. Imagine a new metal folk track in the 80s.
Oh God, I'd be so happy. I would be the lead singer of that band.
I would 100% come to your gig. And speaking of gigs, you have been to many concerts.
I have, yeah.
Which was your favourite?
Concert or festival?
Oh, both.
So my favourite festival was when me, you and Dale went to Download.
Oh, wow.
And there are two major memories that I've got when we went to Download. One was when that random dude shouted at 4:00 in the morning, "Does anybody know who killed my horse?" Even 10 years on, that still gets me. And the second one was you saying to that random girl, because we had the wristbands, "Remember, if you love it, lock it." And she looked at you, she went, "Why are you going to rob me?" And you were utterly devastated. She was like, no, honestly, I'm not. That was my favourite festival, that whole festival. Do you remember on the last day when it pissed it down and we were all getting changed in the back of the car?
Yes, yeah. And I felt awful because it was your car and I was worried about getting everything wet.
And me and Dale didn't give a shit.
I know, but it's your guy's car. I feel like that's acceptable.
Then we watched Linkin Park play in the rain and the mud. That was amazing.
Yeah.
My favourite gig... I've got one was Dale took me to Linkin Park in Birmingham, and it was the first time I'd seen him live, and we were front row, so we were two back from the front.
Wow.
And Chester Bennington jumped into the crowd and Dale threw me over like 6 people, and I held his hand as he was singing in the crowd. So that was amazing. That was like, I can remember walking out of the gig looking at my hand like, I am never watching this again. But my more recent favourite gig is got to have been Electric Eelshock.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, you and Perry asked us to go, and I didn't know what I was expecting, but I thought, you know what? Fuck it, we'll go. It'll be a laugh. And they were so fun. It was just such a genuinely fun time. And the You Bastard song is probably one of the best songs I've ever heard in my life. It
is a great song. So to anybody who doesn't know, and I'd be quite surprised if you don't listen to this podcast, Electric Eelshock is kind of like a pop punk Japanese 3-piece rock band, or kind of like a punk band, I suppose. But they are just so fun to watch. I'm glad that's kind of that gig stuck with you that much, because I remember thinking that you know, I mean, I've been wanting obviously to get you guys into Japanese music for quite a long time, and when Electric Eelshock came, I thought, well, that's probably something that you'll all enjoy. I can't imagine you would have been a real fan of the Hanako gig.
Is that the one that you and Dale went to, where he sent me that picture of you covered in flour?
Yes.
I'm not about that.
Yeah, no. but I knew that you would enjoy Electric Eelshock. But I'm so glad. So I suppose this one is obligatory. But what are your thoughts on Japanese music?
Do you know what? I actually really enjoy it. It's the K-pop nights that we've been to. I've really enjoyed them. I think at first I was a bit like, oh God, it was like the sushi thing. I was a bit like, oh, I'm not going to like this, but fuck it, I'll go, it's a night out. And then when you get there, I really, really enjoyed it. I find them quite, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got.
Yeah,
I found it, all the people there are lovely. The music's pretty similar to ours. The dancing, like obviously Pepe knows all the dancers, so she's amazing to watch because she'll try and teach me and I don't know my left from my right. And I don't know, it's just the whole culture in that scenario seems to be really warming, really welcoming. So I do enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to the next one, to be fair.
That's awesome. Well, so are we, and there's quite a few that are quite looking forward to going back to the K-pop nights and stuff. You recently discovered anime as well. Like, what do you think about the music that's kind of in that? And did you? Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to ask. Did you check out Mute Monster? Because I know that you were saying that you'd like to go to one of their gigs eventually.
I did. Dale played me a couple of songs, and I quite enjoyed them.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I'm up for going to them. Anime. What do I think to anime music? So my ringtone is the Attack on Titan theme.
Okay, excellent. Okay.
So that will answer that question. I have the anime theme, I have the dubbed theme, I've got One Punch Man on my phone. The music in it, I think it sets the scene really well. I think there's some scores of music in there that are beautiful. But then I think the theme songs, they just really gear you up. And like, even though Attack on Titan's theme is basically about killing titans, the unsubbed version, you wouldn't know. I think it's quite bouncy and quite rocky. So I do enjoy the music, and obviously anime. I don't know why it took me so long to get into anime. I failed in life with that, didn't I?
Nah, well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, surprisingly enough, I mean, I don't really watch anime. I'm more of a fan of kind of like I love the music, I love the film, and the dramas were more my thing. I find that some people are very, I mean, there are some obviously that like both, but I found through kind of my journeys and stuff that you either like anime or you like dramas, and I think it's because they are both very over the top.
Oh yeah.
But in total different ways. So anime obviously much more fantasy based, whereas dramas are kind of more your day-to-day stuff. Now I'd like to ask you about your passion for video games.
Okay.
Your puppy has the most adorable name. Are you happy to share the name with the listeners?
Yes, his name's Nanakai.
And why?
Because he's my favourite character. So I know it's pronounced Nanaki, but obviously Miss Bud could not pronounce Nanaki, so we changed it to Nanakai. But yeah, obviously as you saw when you came round earlier, I've got the big Nanakai poster now that Dale got me. I absolutely adore that character. I fell in love with him 23 years ago, and it's never changed. I've got the little action figure of him and Sith Cat on my bedside table. I've got a trading card, a Nanakai trading card on my bedside table. On the radiator next to my bed, I've got a Moogle, a Chocobo and a Cacti. I'm a bit of a Final Fantasy. Oh, I've got a beautiful Chocobo clock that all the way from Japan.
Yes, yep, I remember. To anybody that wouldn't know Nanakai, how would you explain that character? Now,
I would explain him from Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy VII. I would explain him as a wolf. So he is a guardian of Cosmo Canyon. He has very, very poor feelings against his dad until a little bit further on in the game. And even though I've completed that game 20 times, that cutscene still makes me cry. However, from the remake of Final Fantasy, I would say he's more of a cat. So he's a cat dog wolf type creature. He's a guardian, and this sounds really silly, but he's so full of wisdom and he's so full of love that you can't help, and he's super cute.
Yeah, so I think is his name aside from Nanakai, it's Red
13.
He I mean, as somebody that kind of I have a very vague idea of Final Fantasy because of Perry and because of KupoCon.
Yeah.
he would, in terms of kind of what I would be familiar with and what some who don't know those games might, he kind of has the same wisdom as Splinter from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I'd say so. So because he's a guardian, so his original name is Nanakai. He then gets captured by the quote-unquote bad guys in Final Fantasy VII that's called Shinra, and they experiment on him to try and create a brand new race of ancients. So he gets tattooed, and his code name in there is Red 13, hence my gamer tag being Rainbow 13.
Yes.
So when you free him, and he'll say, oh, I'm only stopping with you until I get back to Cosmo Canyon, which, by the way, is probably one of the most beautiful pieces of music in Final Fantasy VII. And you go back and he finds out his backstory, and he's full of wisdom and hope and love, and he's just amazing. I know he's fictional, but he's just amazing.
Mate, at the end of the day, it's fictional characters that represent our world in a way, you know. That's
before
amazing.
We knew Bubba was a girl, I wanted Nanakai for our child, but I had to settle for it for the dog.
I think you should have had your daughter. You could have had it as the middle name.
I know. Well, he got the middle name, didn't he?
We won't mention that. So, would it be safe to say that Final Fantasy VII is your favourite video game?
Yes.
Okay.
It's got a lot of... So, I had a brother, and unfortunately he was killed 15 years ago, and Final Fantasy VII is what we played growing up, so we'd spend hours and hours and hours on it, and I think that's probably why I've got such a love for it, because it was the first real video game that you had to put hours in that I fell in love with. But then it's got a lot of sentimental meaning to me as well.
Of course, and I'm so sorry to hear about that.
It's don't get me wrong, it was awful. He'd messaged me on a Sunday and said, do you want to go out? Well, I was starting college the next day to do my beauty therapy. So I messaged him back and I was like, oh, no, mate, not tonight. I've got college in the morning, you know, don't drink on a school night.
Yeah.
So we ended up going around the circuit, as we did all those years ago. And there was two people driving. So he was on a motorbike. So we went through the middle of them to try and overtake him to get away from him because they kept cutting him up. So as he passed the driver of the Subaru, they turned the wheel and hit the back of his bike, and he come off the bike and hit a lamppost. We got the phone call, obviously early hours in the morning, and obviously had to go to the morgue to identify him. And that was a really surreal experience. Like, I remember walking down the corridor at King's Mill, and it was early hours of the morning. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was very quiet. And it was like, you know, that yellowy tinge when you get in a dream?
Yeah.
That was the sort of lighting. And they walk you into a waiting room, and then they sit you in there. And obviously they prepare the body for you to go and look at. And because he'd not been in long, they'd not cleaned him up. So we obviously had to go in. And I can remember my mum walked in. And my uncle walked in, and I stood at the door, and I couldn't take that step into the room. I can remember seeing my uncle's face, so I knew, but I couldn't step in, and my uncle was trying to like say, come on, you need to do this. And he actually pulled me into the room, which now I'm glad he did, because that would have been one of them things that you never get over if I hadn't have done it.
Yeah.
And I can remember burying my head in my uncle's shoulder and taking that first look. And the first thing I noticed, this is so silly, but the first thing I noticed is he had a black sock on with a hole in it, and his big toe was poking out of it. And I was like, oh my God, seriously, this is how you died. Holy socks, this is just not okay. And then I managed to like lift my head up and look at him, and it was just like he was asleep. You know how when they say to you, it is like they're asleep? It really was, until I went over and touched him, and it was obviously, he was cold.
Yeah.
But it was really hard to comprehend because he just looked asleep. The colour hadn't started draining from him yet, but he was stone cold to the touch, and I was adamant that he was going to get up at any minute. So it took years, and I mean years, of therapy to stop blaming myself, because if I'd have just said on that Sunday, yeah, you know, we'll go out, and you suffer the hangover the next day, as we've all done 1,000 times, that situation may never have happened. And it took a long time. There was a lot of, it very nearly destroyed me, that did, if I'm being honest. That was probably a peak of where the mental illness took hold, was at that trauma. But yeah, I think it probably took about 6 or 7 years to sort of forgive myself for that and be like, well, if you had have gone out, they would have still been driving around the circuit. What would be the difference? That we'd have been crossing the road and it would have happened to both of us. It's sort of balancing it out.
I mean, things like that, you can't ever blame yourself for anyway, because, as you say, the truth is that could have always have been the outcome, and things having been different could have resulted in worse. As strange as that sounds, you know, but you should never blame yourself anyway, because it would have been something that you would have had no control over, even if things had been different.
Yeah.
So you are not to blame in any way, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
It's it had a negative effect for a long time. It put me in a dark place for a long time. But then you sort of realise that, okay, he wouldn't have wanted this. He was so fun-loving. He was such a laugh. Don't get me wrong, he got on my nerves, of course he did. It was part of the job description.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have wanted for me to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Wallow. That's it. Wallow in self-pity.
Of course.
And like, one of the reasons I like Stitch so much, the Disney character, is when I was really, really sad, he'd come and sit next to me and he'd do the Stitch voice to cheer me up. So it took me a lot of years to be able to watch Lilo and Stitch again. And I can remember a couple of years, Dale bought it me for Christmas because he knew I loved the movie. It stayed in my drawer, sealed, because I just couldn't bring myself to watch it. And the first time I watched, and I sat and watched it with her, and I was telling her that, you know, your uncle liked this and things like that, and that sort of made me, because I mean, he'd be a nightmare with her.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and again, I'm so sorry. Having lost people myself, I can totally understand how that must have been, in terms of kind of not knowing how things could have been different, and sometimes blaming yourself, sometimes feeling like so powerless in that situation. But I obviously didn't know him, but I 100% agree with you that I think that he would not have wanted you to have blamed yourself for something that you had no control over. Yeah. Okay. But I'm so sorry. Sorry, mind blank.
I've thrown you again, haven't I? I keep doing that to you.
Have, yeah.
So sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll edit this bit out. No, mate, it's. But thank you for explaining kind of why that game is so meaningful to you, and where kind of your love for games kind of came from in that kind of respect, because that makes it kind of much more powerful as well. It's easy to now see kind of why that holds so much value to you.
Yeah. I think it's also, on a bit of a lighter note, it's escapism as well, isn't it? So if you're, especially with the JRPGs that I prefer, so you have a whole other persona online. You are strong, you are undefeatable, you are somebody that is not going to be trifled with. So I think, when you're having them days where you're feeling a little bit insecure and not your best,
Yeah.
that you escape into a different world.
Yeah.
And especially during COVID. I mean, video gaming during COVID has massively had a positive impact, because I can talk to my friends online. I can just shut down after the day and either go and tame a T-Rex or come on Final Fantasy and play, like last night, me and Perry were dungeon running. Or I can go on 7 Days to Die and build a base and fight zombies, and I'm not stuck in 4 walls. I'm out and about and I'm doing something. So I think video games are really, really powerful, and I feel sorry for people that only see them as a game. They don't see the potential that they have, because they do bring people closer together. Like me and Dale, when Skyrim first came out, God, me and Dale had spent hours on it, and because there was obviously spiders in Skyrim, I used to, Dale would run it for 4 hours, and then I'd go on and run it all straight after him with my character, so I knew what was coming. And daft things like, he'll come upstairs and he'll pop his head round and look at what I'm doing, and he's like, "What you doing? Who's that? What's going off here?" And you can explain it, or if he's on COD, I'll stand behind him. And if I'm not trying to put him off, and the way that I like to put him off, I'll be like, "Oh, look, there's somebody over there. What are you doing that for?" And it is a conversation builder. I mean, me and Dale are polar opposites on what we like. I'll give him his dues. He's tried Final Fantasy, didn't suit him. I think I logged on to Call of Duty, didn't suit me. But I'll still ask him about what he's doing, and he'll still come and ask me. I think they are amazing. Anybody that sees them is nothing but a waste of time. I really, really feel sorry for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And you can experience those all now on your fully kitted out gaming PC.
Yes, I can. I've got turned on right now.
That is awesome. That is so cool. Okay, Jordan, it's now time to ask you some situational questions. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine, darling.
Okay. Number 1. If you had to choose between Linkin Park or Final Fantasy VII, which would you choose?
Oh my god. Final Fantasy VII.
Awesome. Number 2. Would you rather lose your sense of taste or your sense of smell?
My sense of taste, because then I could eat sashimi when we all go for sushi and it wouldn't bother me.
It was quite funny.
Mate, that was me.
Do you eat sashimi? Number 3. Would you rather always have a song stuck in your head or always have an itch that you can't reach?
Can I pick the song?
I suppose so.
Then I'd always have a song stuck in my head, because for the last 3 years I have been living that life with Let It Go. So I can live with that.
There you go. You can't let it go. There you go.
Can't let it go. I wish I could.
Number 4. Would you rather be an unknown superhero or a famous villain?
Obviously I'd be a famous villain.
Well, I don't want to say. Okay. Number 5. What could you not live without?
My daughter.
Beautiful. On the nose. Perfect. I want to ask a question now, which I've asked previous guests. Who has had the biggest impact in your life?
My little girl. She without sounding overly dramatic, that girl saved my life. It took a lot for us to get her, as you know.
Yeah.
And she just makes everything worth it. Every struggle, every hassle, every shit that you put up with at work, or, you know, adult situations, she makes it 1,000% worth it. She has changed me for the better, and if I could be half the woman at 34 that she is at 3, then I'd be doing something right.
Dude, you are an amazing mum. You have an amazing daughter, and that is really no shock considering that she is your and Dale's daughter. So that is a beautiful answer. Jord, how can our listeners support you?
Well, so my day job is I work for a company called Power, and we advocate for vulnerable adults with mental health or mental capacity issues. And a part of our workshop through COVID is we're using electronics to interact with people. So every Thursday we do a virtual drop-in where you speak to a professional advocate about any problems you have. There's a weekly blog that's written by a very, very talented author that you could read. She writes about having mental health issues, having a full-time job, having a child, life through COVID. And we also do a podcast. They've just been released, and I actually had the honour of hosting a podcast. So they're worth a watch. All the ones before the one that me and Dale's dad did are very, very informative. The one that me and Dale's dad did, not so much. More of a chit chat, really. But yeah, give them a listen. And I'm a promoter for a brand that's called Refuse to Conform. They do, obviously, their clothing line, and their main motto is Refuse to Conform. And if you use the code J30, you get a 10% discount, and it also helps me be a good promoter.
That is awesome. I will make sure I put those links in the description so that the listeners can check those out. Thank you for sharing those, Jord.
Thank you.
It has been a genuine honour having you on the show. You are one of the strongest people I've ever met. I am,
Thank you.
as you know, I'm often in awe of some of the struggles that you have faced and the willpower that must take. You have a heart of gold, mate, and I cannot thank you enough for all of the kindness and love that you have shown to me over the last decade. So before we come to the end of the show, I would like to ask you one final question, and it's an important one.
Okay.
Have you enjoyed yourself?
Absolutely fantastic. I've loved it. I love our chats. I love how deep we get, and I love the fact that you've never been Dale's friend. We met through Dale, but I've always counted you as one of my friend, and I can always be totally open and honest, and everything's just so easy with you. I've really, really enjoyed it, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, and I feel the same way about you. You are one of my best friends.
Oh, don't get emotional, Matt. Crumble.
Okay, Jord, thank you so much.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are incredibly fortunate to live in a time where we have the freedom to choose what to believe and how to live. We take it for granted and don't always remember how lucky we are, but know that whatever you're going through and however you may feel, there will always be those of us who are cheering you on, who stand beside you when you need somebody, and who believe in you, even when you might not believe in yourself. So until next time, stay safe, stay positive, and congratulate yourself for everything you have accomplished. You truly are amazing. Good night.